Hello, thank you for tuning into today's episode. Before we get started, I would like to acknowledge the passing of an amazing person, Mr. Joel Roth. He passed away March 30th, 2025, peacefully in his sleep at the age of 88. Mr. Roth had a partnership with National 4-H, which allowed me to be a part of the 4-H National Leadership Academy, along with other 4-Hers from around the country. Because of Mr. Roth and his aspirations for us, this podcast was created. I will forever be grateful to have met him and have received guidance from him as he pushed me and the next generation of leaders to be the best leaders that we could be. I am proud to be a part of his legacy and grateful for him and the opportunities he has given me. Thank you. Hello and welcome to the podcast. I can totally do that. I'm Elena Skinner, your host. This is the podcast where we explore careers and opportunities for people with disabilities from the perspective of people with disabilities. Today I would like to introduce to you Duncan Wyeth. He was retired from paid employment, but not from advocacy. Welcome, Duncan.
Thank you, Elena. It's a real pleasure to be with you.
Duncan, tell us a little bit about yourself.
Well, for starters, I'm a tad bit older than you are, Elena. I will be turning 79 in a few weeks, and I was born in 1946. And I had the good fortune to be born to parents who had very high expectations, even though when I was diagnosed in 1947 with cerebral palsy, the prognosis was your son will never walk, he will have limited intelligence, and he will most likely die by age 40. So my parents accepted the diagnosis that I had cerebral palsy, but they rejected the prognosis.
I love that.
That has stayed with me my entire life. It's the realization that no matter what expectations the outside world, others place on us, that we are our own self-determined people, and it's always been my challenge to exceed those expectations. So now one of my big goals in life is to reach age 80 so I can double the 40-year forecast. But during my lifetime, my parents, long before federal and state law required that I be in a regular mainstream classroom, my parents, I know now, fought some incredible battles to make sure that I went to my neighborhood school, and always not only allowed, but encouraged me to be a risk taker. And I think throughout my childhood and my early adulthood, that served me very well. I had two parents who, as I said, had high expectations for me, thought that I should have the opportunity to try everything at least once, and that sometimes if you don't succeed, that's not a mark of failure. If you don't succeed, that's simply a learning opportunity. It's a chance to take away a learning experience and do it differently next time. So I went off to college. I became a teacher. I taught junior and senior high school after I graduated from Michigan State. And then in 1977, I had the opportunity to join the very early disability rights movement. And here in Michigan, there were three centers for independent living that were established in 1977, and it was my incredible opportunity to be a staff person at one of those first centers here in Michigan. After that, I went on to serve on the staff at the National United Cerebral Palsy Office, which at that time was in New York City. And then after 4 years in the big city, I came back to Michigan and worked for state government until I retired in 2010. But I think much more important than maybe my work experiences has been my um, continuing opportunity to be a volunteer in numerous organizations at the local, state, and national, and even international level. So if you were to look up the word privilege, you might find my name because I recognize that I have had an incredibly privileged life in terms of the opportunities and the experiences that I've had.
That's yeah. You you've not only been privileged, which I'm so happy to know that you understand that, but you also take whatever opportunity is presented to you and make it something wonderful. So I'm so glad that you and your parents have, you know, from the early start, tried to open all the doors and all the opportunities for you. Um, you have cerebral palsy, correct?
Yes, ma'am.
So, yeah. So how? I guess my other question is, did you ever feel like your parents' expectation of you was ever too much?
Let me count the times.
Okay.
I think in any society, it's not just America. Um, it could be in Asia, it could be in Europe, it could be Africa. Society has a certain set of expectations, and I think for those of us who have a visible disability, um, there's a fairly low expectation. And I think even worse than that is that along with that low expectation comes a tendency for people to, or parents, and parents and other adults to maybe not want us to be a risk taker because we might get hurt. We might get physically hurt. We might get emotionally hurt and all that. I'm a great believer that the only way you grow as a person is to get outside of your comfort zone. When you're in your comfort zone, when you're in that nice little cocoon Um, it's kind of wonderful, but you never take a risk. And when you don't take a risk, when you don't get outside your comfort zone, um, you don't grow.
Yeah, I love that, and I think that's such an important message to people listening, and I think we all kind of need a reminder of that sometimes. So I think that's a great a great message. Um, so you have had many career choices, so you are more than welcome to take it any way that you want. Take this question any way that you want. How did you get interested in your career choices, or in your plural or singular?
My mother was an elementary school teacher by training, but she never actually taught at the elementary school, although we did live in Asia for several years in Taiwan. And at Michigan State, Mom often had classes in our home where she would teach students English as a second language. Both during our time in Taiwan, students who wanted to come to the U.S. to study, and students from different countries who came to America who wanted to always improve their English, particularly English slang and English unique characteristics of our language. And then my father, who was at one time a 4-H youth agent, and then later a faculty member at Michigan State University. So both my parents were educators in the broadest sense of the word. So I think that was imprinted on me very early on. They were role models in terms of uh, educators in the broadest sense of the word. And
Yeah,
so I just when I went off to college, I was already pretty much decided that I wanted to teach. I wasn't sure what the subject might be. It took me a while to decide on a major, but I definitely wanted to get my teaching credentials.
what did
And,
you end up what did you end up doing?
and I'm hoping that the attitudes have changed significantly. I know when I first graduated way back in 1969 with a second Michigan teaching certificate, I went through many interviews. And when I compared notes with my non-disabled friends who would go to the same interviews, there was a real hesitancy to hire a person with a disability, a visible disability, to teach in a classroom. So I think there was always that challenge, but I did land a job after many interviews and taught for 8 years at the junior and senior high school level. Then I went off to work in the disability rights field, but I was still an educator. It just that I was no longer in a classroom. The whole world was my classroom.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Um.
And then later on, Elena, later in my mid 50s, I had the opportunity to become an instructor, an adjunct faculty at Michigan State, and spent 15 years teaching a 400 level elective. So I've taught seventh grade through doctoral students and in a classroom setting and a much broader range of students outside of the classroom.
Yeah. Um, and that's, you know, from the interaction that we've had, you certainly are a teacher and you certainly are a good one. You have a lot of knowledge to share, and to express and make aware, which I think is so important. Well, one of the other questions I have for you is, so when, maybe specifically you, but so there's a little bit of difference within the way with which people with disabilities speak. And do you think that that has hindered your ability to kind of present to society as a knowledgeable person? Like the way that our disability affects the way that we speak or enunciate. Have you had any experience with it negatively impacting you, or what would you kind of say to that?
I've had both negative and positive. I remember a time when I was with friends during college in a line waiting to go to a movie, and the couple next to us made the comment, "Do you think he's mentally retarded?" Uh, you know, we tend to associate, at least here in America, one's language pattern with one's level of intelligence. And it's not just limited to those of us who have a disability speech characteristic. Um, the classic example is Billy Bob from Georgia or Alabama, who has a very slow Southern drawl. But I think a lot of people think, oh, because he's got that Southern drawl, slow speech, he's obviously also slow of mind. So I think once we get beyond that, and then you and I and others have the label that is given to our speech pattern that it's a speech impairment, a speech impediment, a speech defect. Think about those three words: impairment, impediment, defect. How many people want one of those for Christmas? Or, gee, for my birthday, could I have a new defect? They're very negative terms and they reinforce stereotypes. And when I moved to New York and I started to realize that people would say, "Oh, you're from the Midwest. You have a Midwestern accent." And I never thought of myself that way. But then I started thinking, yes, I have an accent. My speech pattern, I have a cerebral palsy accent. And I actually think it's kind of like a French accent. It's really quite sexy and intellectual, you know. So everyone in the world has a unique speech pattern. Why with disability people do we have to call it a defect, an impairment, or an imperfection of some type? It's an accent. Everyone has an accent. And the real challenge when we have communication with one another I always know what I'm saying. The challenge is for the listener, the receiver. And unfortunately, a lot of people just nod their head like, but what I really want them to do is say, I didn't get that. Could you repeat that or help me better understand that? And that's the same thing that we do with anyone who has an accent.
Yeah, that is an incredible way to think about it. Like, I've never thought about it in that way. And I think it's so important as a society to look at our labels. What are we labeling other people? Is that hurtful? Is that something that we ourselves would want as a label? I think maybe that will help adjust society's kind of thought process of assigning, you know, what they deem as okay labels, as if we ask them to kind of, you know, be in their shoes with that label and see kind of how it makes them feel.
And you know, Elena, for most of my life, my interaction with people in terms of communication was verbal communication. And I think one of the really fantastic opportunities of the development of the internet, which your generation is growing up with, is that the internet in many ways is language pattern neutral. When you're on the internet or on a text, um, people don't make assumptions or assign value based on your speech pattern. It takes our speech pattern out of the equation in terms of our ability to communicate and share ideas with other people.
Do you think that's a good thing?
Oh, absolutely. I, I just said that the internet not only is, it's also colorblind, it's also gender blind, it's disability blind. Because if you perhaps on a Zoom or a Microsoft Teams meeting or a podcast that you and I are doing right now, yes, some of those characteristics or speech patterns are more visible. But if it's simply text messaging or communicating through typed communication, we don't, it takes the gender, it takes race, it takes disability out of the equation. People don't immediately make assumptions or judgments by what they see or what they hear. It's
Yeah,
more what they read.
yeah. I think that's great, and that's also a new perspective that I haven't really thought about. Like the benefit of, you know, technology. There's a lot of downfalls, but that's another benefit. Um, so I know you're not working, or you're doing a lot of just a lot of like working with others, doing a lot of service. So you can kind of choose how to answer this. Can you tell me what you do in your everyday career? Whether you want to talk about the advocacy part when you were working with that, or whether you want to talk about the teaching, however you would like to take that.
Well, I wanted to, yes, I had a paid employment job. I was director of consumer activities when I worked for the National Office of United Cerebral Palsy. Here in the state of Michigan, I was the director of what's called the Client Assistance Program under the Federal Rehab Act. And for the last 10 years of my career, I was the executive director of our state commission on disability concerns. And for those jobs, I got a paycheck, and that was nice. But that's not what kept me working. It was the basic desire on my part to change attitudes, develop opportunities, and ensure the accommodations that people need to be included in their families, in their local communities, and in their state, and in their nation, and to be world citizens. And I think that's the core of what I do. Yes, I work with an organization called the Cerebral Palsy Research Network because I believe that research um, um, and healthcare is, an essential right and need of all humans. Uh, but I also was part this last year of a accessibility summit that was held here in my part of Michigan, the Keweenaw Peninsula, at Michigan Technology University. And that was a 2 day conference to educate, to inform, to share with local primary consumers, local business partners, local educators about the fact that the disability community are, are, are customers. They're customers of education, they're customers of businesses, retail, restaurants, ski resorts, and to educate the owners and providers uh, to provide the accommodations because guess what? We spend money. We have disposable income, and uh, so it's back to what we were talking about at the very beginning. It's that um, concept of education. The more people know, uh, uh, the more effective they are in providing services and programs and simply embracing people who are different from them and see them not as someone to feel sorry for, charity, not someone to exclude, but as potential customers.
That that is awesome. And I I don't know, I think that's super important for people to understand because societally I'm not sure that people understand that we can truly be in society and contribute to society and pay our own money and be successful in society and enjoy things that other people enjoy. And so I think the work that you have done and that you are doing and the things and the people that you're supporting are truly amazing in the fact that you understand the value of people living um, fulfilling lives.
Well, in my generation, the Albert Einstein of my generation was Stephen Hawking. Stephen Hawking was world famous, an incredible thinker on theoretical physics, etc. Stephen Hawking had a very significant disability. He needed personal assistance for almost every daily activity he undertook. But there's not a single university in the world that would not have provided him with any and every possible accommodation if only he would be faculty at their university. So I think that's part of that education uh, people to help people understand that providing accommodations to a person with a disability is in fact unleashing their full potential.
I sorry.
No, that's okay. It's just that that there are within our world there are people of different characteristics, gender, race, age, disability, who uh, have incredible ideas. They're creative, they're caring, they're thoughtful, but if they don't have the accommodations uh, to display those inherent characteristics, um, they will remain in the shadows. And mankind will be the lesser for that.
I I totally agree with you, and I think one of the goals of this podcast is to educate other people about incredible and amazing things that people with disabilities are doing, opportunities that are out there, um, and truly to educate people that are of my generation, but also all generations, to understand whether you have a disability or whether you know someone or you're the one that's gonna employ that person with the disability. I think the first step in success is proper education and proper understanding of how everybody can be successful in the world. What?
We just real quickly,
Yeah.
in my lifetime, once again, I've seen the Black Pride movement. People of color taking pride in their history, in their race, uh, gender pride, the pride of women, successful women being mothers, um, but disability pride has come kind of lately. You know, it's hard for people to really grasp pride. Being disabled, how can you be prideful of that? Well, you can be. Who are our heroes? Well, how about Stephen Hawking? How about Judy Heumann? Um, how about Titania McFadden, the Paralympic chair user? Um, you know, uh, Senator Duckworth, the former military helicopter the first woman with a disability to have a baby, a child, while serving as a U.S. Senator. And coming to the Senate using her wheelchair with her infant in her lap. Boy, that's something to be prideful about. That's disability pride.
Yeah, that is totally I yeah, because there's so many prideful things for so many other people, and so yeah, why not disability pride? Like the things that we overcome and the things that we do, but also we just live life and we just enjoy it is is so important to show other people that we're capable of living lives to how we want to live them and not let society dictate what we can or cannot do. Um,
You know, you and I, your generation, my generation, for the first time in your young life, in my older life, we were able this last summer to watch multiple hours on television of the Olympic Games and then the Paralympic Games. And to see the incredible performances, not only by our non disabled athletes, but by athletes with a whole range of disability characteristics. And, you know, there's not only national pride in terms of the Olympic Games, but I think there's that pride in seeing somebody that looks like yourself, or moves like yourself, or communicates like yourself, accomplishing at a very high international elite level. That's a source of pride.
totally. Um, what has been as you name accomplishments of wonderful, amazing people, what has been your greatest accomplishment in your career or even lifetime?
Well, first and foremost is the fact that I'm closing in on age 80 and I was supposed to be dead by age 40. So that's that's a pretty decent accomplishment.
Yeah,
I think it's been the opportunity to um, to meet people from around the world, and I want to go back real quickly to the Paralympic Games. That's the largest gathering of people with disabilities that ever happens anywhere. I mean, that the amount of, and I've had the great privilege to not only be an athlete, but be an administrator and a volunteer at a number of Paralympic Games. The incredible amount of sharing. Uh, and so I think an accomplishment, Elena, that I take a lot of pride in is being part of that process of bringing people together to learn from one another and to grow as individual persons. You
yeah,
know, I've had yeah, sure I've had the titles have been nice, the awards have been nice, but what's really nice is that the feeling of accomplishment that I would like to think, I do believe that I have more often than not brought some insight and some growth and some understanding um, to the gathering, the sharing of people.
Yeah, and I think that is it can be that can be taken for granted as an accomplishment, but truly I think it's a great one. So I love that. So on the other end of the spectrum, what has been your greatest disappointment?
Wow, I've never had time to think about disappointments, except as an opportunity to learn from them. I think I think my biggest disappointment is on a personal level as a born educator is that we've come so far in my lifetime, but we still have so far to go. Um, but I think that's not just true about disability. That's true about racial differences, religious differences, gender differences, age differences. Yes, we are light years beyond uh, where we were as a society when I came into it back in 1946. But I guess my disappointment is that I'm not going to be here for another 78 years to see where we are um, in the 22nd century. That would be great.
Yeah, that would be, and that's that's we you're right in the fact that we've come so far. Um, like Judy Hewitt and so many others like yourself have fought for the things that we do have, but you're right. There's so much further to go, and as we keep educating ourselves and understanding and being kind to one another in society, the growth will happen much faster and with much more um, uh, intent of success. Do you so I'm kind of interested in this next question in the fact of maybe a comparison of before and after. So, do you have parts of your disability? Sorry, do you have parts of your career modified to accommodate your disability? And I'm kind of thinking, you know, because if I'm doing timelines right, you were in the workforce before the really solid establishment of the ADA, correct?
Oh, absolutely.
Okay.
Long.
So what did that look like for you without having the protection of the ADA kind of helping you in your career, but also kind of now, like, do you have any suggestions or accommodations that you have kind of stuck with once you found that they worked for you?
Earlier, Elena, I talked about the fact that in many ways I am the definition of privilege. I am white. I am college educated. I am very middle class. And I have never been unemployed during my adult working years. That's a real bias. And those characteristics, and I might add white male to that, um, those were incredible assist positives for me. What I see most important about ADA, the Air Carriers Access Act, the Voting Rights Act, the access to housing, the barrier-free design laws, is that when we have those and when we have enforcement of those regulations, we have the opportunity for people to excel beyond what even they thought they could do. It gives them the. I've had, because of those underlying characteristics that I talked about, yes, sure, I've had a disability. Yes, it's a visible disability. Yes, I know what discrimination is. I've experienced that. But I've also had the education, the social skills, the networks um, to overcome any of those negative impacts. That's not true for the vast majority of people with disabilities. And all we have to do is look at the employment statistics. You know, 78% of non-disabled people are in the workforce. Only about 30% of people with disabilities are in the workforce. So there's something else going on. And so laws like ADA, laws like the Barrier Free Design Act, laws like Air Carriers Access Act for travel, these provide the opportunities. They provide people with the access to some of the very attributes that I've had because of my upbringing, because of my parents, and because of the incredible, you know, a lot of people, I guess somehow, and I can't put my finger on it, but I think my parents taught me that when the door is open, walk or roll through it. And unfortunately, all too many people see an open door and they think, uh-oh, I don't, I'm worried, I'm afraid of what's on the other side. Or the door isn't ramped, or the door isn't wide enough, or what have you. And so anything that we can do in terms of statutes, regulations, practice, just daily practice. You know, I, long before ADA was passed, requiring sign language interpretation, and interestingly, ADA does not cover religious bodies. There were many churches that were providing sign language interpretation. There were many churches that were building ramps. There were many churches that were providing access to an altar for communication. None of that was required by law, So I don't want to overemphasize the impact of civil rights. It's just practice. It's a commitment to including the widest possible variety of people. And for you and me, for the disability community, it's not just people with visible disabilities like you and I. The vast majority of people who have a disability by legal definition do not look disabled. They have non-apparent characteristics. They have uh, heart conditions. They have cancer. They have epilepsy. They have intellectual or cognitive barriers that prevent them, or not prevent them, but get in the way of their fulfilling their full potential. So I think it's that commitment on all our part that with or without the legal requirements, we are going to commit ourselves to uh, reaching out, to providing supports necessary for people to fulfill their personal dreams.
Yeah, it's it's so it's so interesting that I didn't know that you know churches kind of took that role other places. And I think it's so interesting of what you said of just the fact that um I loved your analogy of like when the door is open, walk or roll through it. Because truly you don't know what's on the other side of that. You can guess as much as you want, and you can throw a fit or whatever, but truly you're not gonna know what you don't know until you walk through that door. So
You and I, and all of us who see ourselves as advocates, really have to guard against uh, a sense of entitlement. You know, just because I have cerebral palsy, no one owes me anything, no, any more than society owes you something because of your gender or your age or your race or your religious beliefs. And I think sometimes in the disability community, we've allowed this sense of entitlement. Um, because I have a disability, you owe me, this. I mean, when I go somewhere and I have to buy a ticket or something, and somebody says, "Oh, you get half price because you have a disability," and I'm thinking, no, I have disposable income. I'm middle class. I don't deserve a half price ticket just because I have a disability. Now, if I have a disability and I'm poor, yeah, I think maybe a free ticket would be more appropriate. But
yeah,
I honestly can't afford any price. But
or
that's entitlement, and we have to be careful that we don't slip into this entitlement belief that
Yeah, I think that that's a entitlement. I think can be appetizing at some points.
But
Sometimes.
let me be transparent here. A little confession. Do I absolutely need, when I travel by air, to be the first person on the airplane? Maybe more so today because I'm using a walker now for mobility, and I used to ambulate most of my life without assistive device. But even in those days, when they said, "Well, we're ready to board this flight. Is there anybody and are there any ticket holders who may need extra time?" I'd always raise my hand. Yeah, I took advantage of that.
And,
Did I
and
feel a tiny bit guilty? Probably. But it was awful nice to always get my luggage in the overhead bin before the crowd came on.
totally. I have used that, and I truly appreciate that. Something that I think of too is of half price of I think of um national parks where people with disabilities at certain parks can get a can get a pass or get whatever they need to enter the park for free or for half price. And I think personally I think that is smart in the fact of the national park, because there may be less access points. They may have tried to do as much as they could, but so I kind of, yeah.
But here's where we have to be careful. Here's where it's a slippery slope. Because basically, if I allow someone to discriminate in my favor because of my disability, then I don't have a right to complain if they discriminate negatively because of my disability. In other words, I can't say, "Hey, I have a disability, you should let me do this, half price, first in line, first to board, extra time to take a test." And sometimes that's very legitimate, and sometimes it's not. But if we let that happen when we don't need it, then we really don't have a right to complain about negative discrimination if, in fact, we embrace positive discrimination.
Yeah.
It's
I
a moral dilemma. It's
yeah,
maybe not moral, but it's certainly an ethical dilemma.
it's a dilemma, and it makes you think, and it makes you ponder, what do you want, what do you want from this experience. um so I have my next question is, how do you ask for help in a professional manner?
First and foremost, you have to be comfortable to ask for help to begin with. And for many people, I mean, even the independent living movement, I have problems with that term because nobody's independent. Nobody drills their own oil well and refines their own gasoline and assembles their own car. It's we are very interdependent people, but there is this I think is an insidious value that we have that says, "Boy, you want to be independent. Well, I can do it myself," and that can get in the way of simply saying, "Hey, could you help me here?" You know, can and that's the first big hurdle, being willing to ask for help. I Boy, I can't think of a single time in my life that I've asked for some help that people weren't very willing to provide that.
Yeah,
And I really don't remember anyone saying, "Oh, I'm not going to help you."
it never in my experience I've learned that it never hurts to ask, um or to try things, or to and I love the comment about um like independence, and truly we are an interdependent society. um and sometimes I think people with disabilities just get, you're either really independent or you're very dependent on somebody else, and there's no middle ground. Whereas I think for people that don't have a disability, they are sometimes more in that middle ground than they think other people with disabilities are.
But
What?
sometimes public policy gets in the way though, because we start to make judgments about, does Elena really need a personal assistant? You know, if she applies for um, a guide when she goes skiing at Alpine Valley outside the Twin Cities, uh, does she really need that? And so we develop these artificial public policy rules and regulations that sometimes get in the way of just simple support.
Yeah, that's a very good point about, how sometimes public policy can can just get in the way sometimes. What I
You just real quickly, you and and I'm not sure about Minnesota, but I know here in Michigan, I can't take my walker and go into a Secretary of State office and ask for a disability placard or a disability license plate. You know, they're not going to take my word for it, looking at me or hearing my. I first of all have to go to a doctor and have a doctor certify that I need a disability placard. As an example of a hurdle that we develop. Yes, I understand there are people that would abuse it otherwise, but guess what? There are people that abuse it anyways.
yeah,
So, it's just that I intrinsically resent having to be certified as medically needy in order to get something that significantly helps my access to shopping, to eating, to entertainment, to recreation. So
That's
that's my soapbox.
that's a very good point, and it's similar here in Minnesota too. What advice would you give to somebody with your disability who wants to pursue your career?
Always take the opportunities in life to volunteer, to try something. I way back in ninth grade, I was on the student council. Um, I have learned more from my volunteer experiences than I have learned from my paid work experience. It's getting out there, trying different activities, working with different people, different organizations, and learning new skills, learning new social skills, learning new mobility skills, learning new programmatic skills, and that builds, it keeps building on itself. I've sometimes thought if I had it, people say, wouldn't you like to be 35 again? And I'd say, oh, yeah, absolutely. But only if I could go back to being 35 knowing what I know today.
I think volunteerism is super valuable, and I've also learned the value in it, and I think all of the points that you've made today truly are provide a new perspective to people, and kind of show them a different side of disability. Is there anything else that you would like to add before we wrap up today's episode?
I think it's learn as much as you can about your own characteristic. For me, it's cerebral palsy. It affects my speech and mobility. Um, I want to learn as much as I can about it. How to accommodate it, how to work with it, how it might change over the years, but also take time to learn about other people's experiences. You know, I have a bias because of my physical disability. I have a bias toward physical access. And for people with cognitive neurodiversity, neurodiverse characteristics, um, access for them may be totally different. And so as much as we can learn about other disabilities and other characteristics and how those impact individual lives, it makes us more effective in our own advocacy, and it also exposes us to new experiences. Um, Back when I was teaching junior high school at Resurrection at Lansing Catholic Central, or Resurrection, if somebody had told me one day you'll be a Paralympic athlete and you'll be vice president for the International Paralympic Committee, I probably would have died laughing. Because at that point in my life, I had no concept of what that meant. but because I got involved in some local adaptive sport programs, it was like, wow, I really like this. and you go forward from there. So trying new things, trying different things, meeting different people. Um, I saw a statistic the other day, Elena, that you who are youth represent 25% of our population, but you also represent 100% of our future. So
Wow.
don't look at where you are or what you are today. Realize that, yes, as a high school student, you're in the minority now, but you're going to be 100% of the future. And that I also saw something that said that young students leaving high school today might have 5 different careers in their lifetime. And you know what? I think that's exciting. I For me, I find excitement in learning new ways of doing something. So
That is a great way to wrap it up, and I love those statistics, and um I yeah, I've learned so much today. So thank you, Duncan.
well, thank you. I just wow. I from my perspective, I'm just so excited about your generation and the impact that you will have um, on the future of the Twin Cities, the future of Minnesota, the future of this country, and most importantly, the future of the world. So keep up the good work.
Thank you very much. Duncan, you have shown us that you can totally do that, and so can others. Thank you for coming on today and sharing your experiences. This is your host, Alina Skinner, saying thank you to all of you for your time. Join us next time for the next podcast. I can totally do that.